To set the stage for Samson's birth, Israel was under the oppressive rule of the Philistines. Samson was born in Nazirite and was chosen by God to deliver Israel. He was given extraordinary strength to accomplish this task. The book of Judges contains the story of his life. Once again, the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and so the Lord handed them over to the Philistines for 40 years. Judges chapter 13 verse 1. At this point, the author introduces us to a man named Manoah whose wife was unable to conceive. Judges chapter 13 verse 2. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said that she would give birth to a son who would be Israel's next deliverer. Judges chapter 13 verse 3. This was a unique event that happens several times in the Bible, such as the birth of Isaac in the Old Testament and John in the New Testament. This promised boy would grow up to save Israel from the power of the Philistines. With this role came a unique condition that none of the other judges had. The angel told Manoah's wife to raise the child according to the Nazirite vow, which is explained in Numbers chapter 6 verses 1 to 5. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if a man or woman wants to make a special vow, a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazirite, they must abstain from wine and other fermented drink and must not drink vinegar made from wine or other fermented drink. They must not drink grape juice or eat grapes or raisins. As long as they remain under their Nazirite vow, they must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, not even the seeds or skins. During the entire period of their Nazirite vow, no razor may be used on their head. They must be holy until the period of their dedication to the Lord is over. They must let their hair grow long." This meant that he couldn't drink wine or beer and he couldn't trim his hair. Interestingly, the angel advised the woman not to consume wine or beer while she was pregnant nor to eat anything unclean. That meant her son would be consecrated to God as a Nazirite even while he was still in the womb. Despite the fact that the heavenly visitor was speaking directly to her, the woman went to her husband and informed him what had transpired. Judges chapter 13 verses 8 to 13. Manoah prayed to the Lord and asked the angel of God to come and teach them what they should do for the child who would be born. The angel came to the woman again, and when Manoah asked him what would be the boy's rule of life and work, the angel repeated all that he had previously commanded the woman to observe. Judges chapter 13 verses 14 to 14. Manoah probably mistook him for a mere man sent from the Lord and asked him to stay while they prepared a young goat. The visitor agreed to stay but said he wouldn't eat anything. It would be more appropriate for the couple to offer a burnt offering. When Manoah put the burnt offering on a rock as requested, the visitor did something miraculous. He rose in the flame and went up in the sky. At the sight, Manoah and his wife collapsed face down on the ground. Suddenly, Manoah was terrified and said, "We're certainly going to die because we have seen God." He rightly equated the angel of the Lord with God. Judges chapter 14 verses 19 to 20. Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it upon the rock to the Lord. And he did a wondrous thing while Manoah and his wife looked and saw a Philistine woman whom he wanted to marry. His parents objected, but Samson insisted on marrying her. During the wedding feast, Samson posed a riddle to the Philistine guests, promising them 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing if they could solve it. Unable to solve the riddle, the Philistines threatened Samson's wife and forced her to reveal the answer to them. Angered by their deceit, Samson went on a rampage and killed 30 Philistines to fulfill his end of the bet. Samson's marriage to the Philistine woman ultimately ended in disaster. She betrayed him to her people, and Samson had to flee for his life. He later returned to take revenge on the Philistines, using his strength to uproot the city gates of Gaza and carry them away. Samson's strength and cunning continued to bring him success against the Philistines, but his pride and love of women led him astray. Samson's downfall came at the hands of a woman named Delilah, who was bribed by the Philistine rulers to discover the secret of his strength. After Samson deceived her 3 times, Delilah wore him down with her persistent questioning until he finally revealed that his strength came from his uncut hair. While Samson slept, Delilah cut off his hair, and the Philistines captured him and gouged out his eyes. Imprisoned and blinded, Samson was forced to grind grain in the prison mill. But his hair began to grow back, and with it, his strength. In a final act of sacrifice, Samson called out to God to give him the strength to bring down the temple of the Philistine god Dagon. killing himself and thousands of Philistines in the process. Despite his flaws, Samson is remembered as a hero of Israel, chosen by God to deliver his people from the Philistines. His story serves as a reminder of the power of faith and the importance of staying true to one's calling, even in the face of temptation and adversity. Samson was on his way to Timnah to meet his bride-to-be when a young lion attacked him. However, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him and he tore the lion apart with his bare hands. Samson kept this feat to himself and proceeded to meet the woman. Later, at a feast, he challenged the Philistines with a riddle, and the prize for answering it was 30 sets of clothes. When the Philistines could not solve the riddle, they threatened Samson's bride to reveal the answer. Eventually, she wept for 7 days and forced Samson to reveal the solution to her, which led to the death of 30 Philistine men. When Samson went to visit his wife, he found that her father had given her to another man. This made Samson angry, so he caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs, setting them on fire and releasing them into the fields of the Philistines. The Philistines retaliated by killing Samson's wife and father, which led to Samson killing many of them in revenge. The Philistines then besieged a village in Judah, and the people of Judah handed Samson over to the Philistines. But when the Philistines saw Samson approaching, they were frightened because the Spirit of the Lord had come upon him, and he broke free of his bindings and killed many of them. The story of Samson in Judges chapters 15 to 16 provides a fascinating insight into the workings of the Lord's Spirit in the Old Testament, as well as the dangers of compromising with the surrounding culture. When the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson, he was able to break free from the ropes that bound him and defeat 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. Despite his great victory, Samson became extremely thirsty and cried out to the Lord for help. In response, God created a spring for him, and Samson was able to lead Israel for 20 years. While the Spirit of the Lord descended upon people in the Old Testament in response to specific circumstances, since the New Testament, the Spirit has come to dwell in every believer. This means that believers can be filled with the Spirit and live under His authority, rather than being preoccupied with living life according to the rules of the world. However, Samson's personal choices become concerning, as he goes to Gaza and sees a prostitute, reflecting Israel's betrayal of the Lord by prostituting themselves with other gods. When the Philistines discover Samson's indiscretion, he uses his great strength to pull the city gate out of its place and carry it to the top of a mountain. This event serves as proof that although Samson was outside of the will of God, God had not left him yet. Samson's life spirals further downwards when he falls in love with Delilah, who ultimately betrays him to the Philistines. This story serves as a warning against compromising with the surrounding culture and betraying the Lord, as it can lead to a downward spiral of destruction. The story of Samson and Delilah in the book of Judges chapter 16 is well known, but it can be challenging to understand the events described in the text. The narrative tells us that the Philistine leaders paid Delilah to find out the secret of Samson's great strength, which they could use to overpower him. Delilah attempted to learn the secret from Samson 3 times, but each time he gave her a false answer. However, she persisted, and Samson eventually revealed that his strength came from his uncut hair, which was a sign of his lifelong Nazirite vow to God. Delilah took advantage of Samson's trust in her and shaved off his hair while he was sleeping, leaving him powerless against the Philistines. The story is often interpreted as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing romantic relationships over one's devotion to God. Samson's tragic fate illustrates the consequences of disobedience and the importance of remaining faithful to God. However, the story also reminds us that even when we make mistakes, God's grace and mercy can provide a way forward. In the end, Samson's hair grew back, and he was able to defeat the Philistines and fulfill his mission as a judge of Israel.